Picture a job that starts at 10 minutes to 5 in the morning and does not end, ever, because the last task of the night is lying awake doing arithmetic in the dark. No wages, no shifts, no union, no foreman, no whistle at quitting time, because there is no quitting time. Now take away the money. Not her money, she never handled much of that to begin with. The country's money. All of it. Fill the job with a family of 5 fed on roughly 65 cents a day, every day without anyone getting sick or getting smaller. Add a coat that will be worn by 3 different people over 9 years and is about to be taken apart with a razor blade and rebuilt inside out. Add a woman who will eat standing at the stove for most of a year so that nobody at the table notices what is missing from her plate. Add a mason jar of egg money hidden in a flour tin, which for one strange week in March of 1933 will be the only functioning bank in a 4-block radius. That's a kitchen in an American mill town at the bottom of the Great Depression, the most invisible workplace in the country, and the only one that never shut down. A place where a quart of home-canned tomatoes counts as wealth, and where the difference between a family that holds together and a family that lets go is a woman nobody pays, doing work nobody names. We're going back there tonight. Not as visitors admiring the quaint old stove. We're living it. One woman. 1 year. The worst year. Spring of 1932 to the spring of 1933. Everything she would have counted, scrubbed, stretched, stitched, hidden, and survived. So, I make these history stories, and honestly, I've given up trying to figure out whether anyone actually sleeps to them, or whether you're all just a particular kind of weirdo who drifts off best to the sound of a woman counting change into tin cups by lamplight. Either way, subscribe if you feel like it. Get comfortable. Here we go. One honest thing before we step inside. The year is real. The prices are real. They come out of the grocery advertisements and the household budget studies of 1932 and 1933. The ones the home economists compiled while all this was happening. The practices are real. The cinder sifting, the flour sack dresses, the dime insurance, the relief office shame. All of it documented in the oral histories, told decades later by the women who lived it, and the children who watched them. But the town in this story wears no name, because it wears 100 names. And the woman whose hands you're about to wear is stitched together from hundreds of real women whose testimony survives. The eyes are borrowed. Everything they see actually happened to someone in those exact years, at those exact prices. The first sound of the day is a rattle. Cast iron on cast iron, a rocking, grinding clatter. You're shaking the grate of the kitchen stove and you've been awake for 6 minutes, and you have not yet lit a lamp because you know this stove the way you know your own teeth. 10 minutes to 5 in the morning. The kitchen is black and cold enough that your breath moves ahead of you like something separate. Under your left hand, the ashpan slides out with a soft grey exhale, and the cold of the handle goes straight through the rag you're holding it with, into the split skin at the base of your fingers, into the crack along your thumb that opened in October and will not close until June. Then the smell arrives, in layers, the way it always does. Cold ash first, bitter and dry, a smell like the inside of an old pipe. Under that, yesterday's cabbage still hanging in the curtains. Under that, the kerosene of the lamp you're about to light, and the brown soap drying on the sink rail, and beneath everything, faint but permanent, the smell of a house where 6 people wash with 2 kettles of warm water a week, including you. You carry the ashpan to the back step in the dark and you do the thing you do every morning now. The thing you would have been ashamed of 3 years ago. You sift the ashes. There's a screen. Frank made it from an old window screen and 4 laths. And you shake yesterday's ashes through it, slow, so the dust settles down instead of up into your face, and you listen. That's the trick your neighbour Bertha taught you. You don't look for the unburned coal, you listen for it. Ash whispers, clinker clicks. Coal. Good coal. Black lumps the size of walnuts that fell through the grate before they finished burning. Coal knocks. Every knock is heat you already paid for. This morning the screen gives you 9 lumps, almost a pound, and you pick them out with bare fingers because gloves make you clumsy, and the cold of them burns like a slow iron. Nothing is wasted. Nothing is ever wasted. That is the first law of this house now, and you are its whole government. Welcome to an iron and steel town in the Mahoning Valley of Ohio, in the last week of April, 1932. Back inside, you build the fire the way your mother built it in another cold kitchen 30 years ago. Twists of newspaper you already read twice. Kindling split from a fruit crate Sam Aldo let you take from behind the grocery. Then last night's rescued lumps. Then, only when the flame has caught and committed itself, 3 pieces of new coal from the scuttle. The scuttle is the measure of everything. A ton of soft coal costs $6.50 delivered, and there are maybe 400 pounds left in the cellar bin, and it is April, so the arithmetic can be survived. But you still count every piece, because winter is not a season anymore. Winter is a creditor. It gets paid all year. Your name is Anna. You're 34 years old. You've been married for 14 years to a machinist named Frank, who has not been a machinist since the 12th of October, 1931, at 10 o'clock in the morning, when the foreman came down the line at the Mills machine shop with a list, and Frank's name was on it, and 31 other names were on it, and nobody even argued, because by then the mills in this valley were running at 1/5 of what they could do, and everyone had watched the furnaces go dark one by one, like somebody walking down a hallway putting out lamps. Frank was making $32 a week. For 14 years, $32 a week, minus the slow times. Now he makes what he can, which some weeks is $4 and some weeks is nothing, hauling ash, splitting cordwood, 2 days once at the ice house when a man was sick. You have 3 children asleep above your head. Eddie, who is 12 and thinks he is the man of the house in a way that frightens you. Helen, who is 8 and has begun to notice things you wish she wouldn't. And June, who is 4 and notices nothing except whether there is jam, and there is never jam. And you have a house. 5 rooms, a cellar, a back lot 40 feet by 90, 6 hens, and a mortgage, a building and loan share account, $11 a month, more than half paid off after 11 years of paying. The house is the thing. The house is why you do all of it. Families around here that lost the payments moved in with relatives, 2 families to 5 rooms, and the women in those kitchens have a look you have decided you will never have. The fire catches. The stove begins to tick, iron waking up, and you set the kettle on the front lid where the heat comes first, and you light the small lamp, kerosene, because the electric costs money every time you touch the switch, and the company already sent 1 yellow notice, and the kitchen assembles itself out of the dark around the flame. Oilcloth on the table, worn white at the 4 places where plates go, the dish cupboard. Frank made the 2nd year you were married, the flour tin, the clock shelf, the calendar from the coal dealer, April 1932, with a picture on it of a girl in a red coat feeding swans, a red coat nobody in this valley could buy now, feeding bread to birds, which is a joke the calendar does not know it is making. And now, quickly, quietly, before anyone else is awake, you do the private accounting. You do it every morning while the kettle heats, the same order, like a rosary. In the flour tin, pushed down into the flour itself, where a burglar would never think and a child would never dig, is a mason jar with a zinc lid. The egg money. You do not open it every day. You just put your hand into the cold flour and touch the lid and count in your head what you know is in it. $4.60 in dimes and quarters, and one folded dollar bill, built up 11 cents and 15 cents at a time over 2 years of selling eggs to the 2 houses on Prospect Street that still have salaries in them. Frank knows the jar exists. Frank does not know what's in it, and he has never once asked. And that is a kind of gentleness the two of you do not discuss. On the clock shelf, leaned against the clock where you cannot avoid seeing it, is a small buff-coloured card ruled into 52 little squares, 16 of them punched. The insurance card, Metropolitan Industrial Policy, burial insurance on Frank 10 cents a week, collected every Thursday at the door by an agent named Mr. Gandy, who's been walking this street longer than you've lived on it. A dime a week, so that if the worst thing happens, there is a coffin and a funeral and no shame. You keep the card where you can see it because the card is a wall, and every punch square is a brick in it. And behind the clock itself, folded in quarters, is a piece of paper you have never unfolded. It came into the house in March, brought by a man from the county who was going door to door on the streets where the mills men live. An application blank, he said, for relief. Just to have on hand, he said, just in case. Frank took it because refusing it in front of the man would have been a scene. And Frank does not make scenes. And then he folded it in quarters without reading it, and put it behind the clock the way you'd put a snake in a jar. It has been there 5 weeks. Neither of you has touched it. In this town, in this year, there are families eating dandelions and lard who have not touched that paper. You know a woman on Centre Street whose children got so thin the teacher sent a note home, and the woman burned the note in the stove and still did not go down to that office. You understand her completely. That paper is not help. That paper is a door out of one country and into another, and everyone knows people who went through that door, and nobody has watched one come back. The kettle sighs. Upstairs, a bed creaks. Frank, awake in the dark, not coming down yet. He does that now. He lies still an extra half hour every morning because coming downstairs means starting a day. And starting a day means finding out whether there's work in it, and mostly there isn't. You have learned to give him that half hour the way you'd give a man medicine. You pour the first hot water into the dishpan, shave a curl of brown soap into it, and begin on the milk pail and the separating of the morning, and the day, the real day, the working day of a woman whose job it is to make nothing into enough, begins the way it always begins, with the count. Here is what the count is, and I need you to understand what counting means in a kitchen in 1932. This isn't checking your bank balance. There is no bank balance. This is a woman standing in lamplight with a stub of pencil and a child's composition book. The ledger, you call it, though it's just a nickel notebook with a mottled cover. Writing down to the penny what came in and what went out. Because the margin between this family and the relief office is currently about 90 cents a week, and 90 cents does not manage itself. The ledger says this for last week. In Sustiscandiam, $4 from Frank, 2 days hauling for the coal dealer plus an afternoon of splitting wood for the Lutheran parsonage. 68 cents egg money, 4 dozen at 17 cents, which is what eggs have fallen to because everything has fallen. 2 years ago, those same eggs brought 35. Out. $2.75 to Sam Aldo against the grocery book. $1 to the building and loan, which is not the 11 the mortgage wants. But the secretary at the building and loan takes the dollar and writes it down and says nothing, because half his book is paying $1 when it should pay 11. And if the building and loan ever forecloses on everyone who's behind, it will own 40 houses nobody on earth can buy. 10 cents to Mr. Gandhi Thursday, the punch going through the card with a sound like a small bone-breaking click. 5 cents church, 9 cents kerosene. A nickel eddy needed for school that you did not ask questions about. That's the shape of it. Roughly $5 a week coming in when it comes, and a family of 5 to feed, and the home economists. There are actual scientists working on this, women with degrees, publishing bulletins from Washington about the adequate diet at minimum cost. The home economists say a family of 5 can be fed decently on about $5 a week if the woman doing it makes no mistakes. Read that again. If she makes no mistakes. $5, 21 meals apiece, 105 plates of food every week. Do the division and you get just under 5 cents a plate. That is the budget. A nickel a plate, and the nickel has to carry protein, and the nickel has to carry heat, and the nickel has to look enough like supper that a laid-off machinist can sit down to it and still feel like a man. So you plan the week the way a general plans a campaign, and the campaign is always the same campaign. Beans. A 25-pound sack of navy beans costs $1.30 at Aldo's and lasts a month. Beans Monday with a square of salt pork the size of a matchbox, boiled so long the pork is a rumour in the pot. Bean soup Tuesday from Monday's pot with an onion and the rind. Wednesday, if the hens are kind, eggs and fried mush. Thursday, whatever Thursday allows. Friday, potato soup with milk. Saturday, beans again, nobody comments. Commenting is not done. And Sunday, the week's one performance, a pot roast if there was work, or a meatloaf that is 1 part meat to 2 parts, oatmeal and grated potato. Seasoned hard because seasoning is cheap and forgiveness is not. You have taught yourself the arithmetic of stretch, the way Frank once learned thousandths of an inch. Oatmeal doubles meat, bread crumbs triple it. A cup of milk and a roux make soup out of anything that ever stood near a vegetable. Yesterday's bread becomes milk toast. Stale bread becomes bread pudding with raisins if there are raisins, without if there aren't. The water potatoes boiled in goes into the bread sponge because there's food in that water, your mother said. So, and the bulletins from Washington now agree with your mother. Vinegar pie. You should hear about vinegar pie, because vinegar pie is the whole era on one plate. It's what you make when a pie is required. A birthday, a funeral, a Sunday that needs saving. And there is no fruit and no lemon and no money for either. Flour, sugar, water, a lump of butter the size of a thimble, and cider vinegar, which sounds like a punishment and bakes into something so close to lemon that a hungry child will swear to the lemon. Sweetness is a problem you solve with chemistry. Somebody figured that out. Some woman nobody wrote down, and it moved from kitchen to kitchen along the back fences the way everything moves now, because the neighbourhood women have become a single distributed brain, whose entire project is getting everyone on the street to September. By 5:30 the oatmeal is on, bought loose in bulk, cooked slow with salt, no sugar on the table but a tin of molasses that is watched like a bank vault. And Frank comes down. You hear him on the stairs and you read the footsteps the way you read the ash sieve. Slow and even. No work today. And he knows it. He comes into the lamplight in his undershirt with his suspenders hanging, and he stands at the stove a second with his hands over the iron, and his hands are the thing you cannot look at straight. Machinist hands, wide and exact, hands that held a micrometer for 14 years and could feel 1,000th of an inch of error through steel, and now they hang there warming with nothing in them. Grates shook, you say. There's coffee in a minute. The coffee is half chicory, and the milk in it comes from the top of yesterday's bottle, but there will be a cup and it will be hot and he will hold it a long time. Schmidt might have hauling Thursday. He says it's the stove, not to you. Might. Thursday's good, you say, as if Thursday were a fact instead of a hope, and that little lie spoken level before dawn is work. Count it. Nobody else will. There's a whole shift of that work in this house every day. The not asking, the not mentioning, the keeping of his dignity like one more child that has to be fed. And it is the only job in the kitchen that leaves no evidence at all. The children come down at 6:30 in a bundle of cold feet and elbows. Eddie first, dressed already, hair wet-combed, 12 years old going on 30. Then Helen dragging June by the hand, June still trailing sleep and one sock. They eat the oatmeal. You stand at the stove and eat yours from the pot. You tell them the cook's privilege is eating standing up. You make it sound like a treat, and only you know that what's in the pot for you is half what's in their bowls, because the pot hides quantity, and a plate confesses it. You eat last, and you eat least. You have gotten so good at it that you no longer exactly feel it, except at 10 in the morning and 4 in the afternoon, when the floor tilts a little, and you stand still until it levels. Then the shoe problem, which is a season, not a moment. Eddie's boots are sound because Eddie's boots are new to him from the church box and 2 sizes grown into. But Helen's school shoes have gone through at the ball of the left foot, right through, sole flapping like a little mouth, and you have done the things you do, cardboard cut to fit, a piece of an old rubber heel glued in, a folded square of oilcloth on wet days because oilcloth turns water, and the cardboard lasts 2 days dry and 1 day wet, and it has been a wet April. The cobbler on Federal Street wants 85 cents for half soles. New shoes at the Beehive are $1.98. There is a system for this decision, and the system is called waiting. You wait until the arithmetic forces you, and this morning you look at the shoe, and the shoe says 2 more weeks, and you cut fresh cardboard from a Quaker Oats box, and Helen holds her foot up on the chair without being asked. 8 years old, and she holds her foot up like a horse being shod. Patient, and she doesn't complain, and the not complaining is the part that goes through you. She learned it from watching you. You pack the dinner buckets, bread and lard sprinkled with salt for Eddie, bread and apple butter for Helen, and into Eddie's pail, wrapped separate 1 hard-boiled egg, which is 17/12 of a cent leaving the house, and worth it, because Eddie is growing so fast his wrists have outrun every sleeve he owns. The school is 4 blocks up. Helen's teacher this year is Miss Carey, who is young and serious, and about whom the town knows one scandalous thing that is not her fault. Since January, the district has been paying its teachers not in money but in tax anticipation scrip. Printed promises. I owe us against taxes nobody can collect, and the stores downtown take it at 90 cents on the dollar or not at all. A woman with a college certificate teaching 40 children paid in paper that isn't money. Remember her. She's not done in this story. The door bangs twice and the children are gone into the grey and the house drops into its working silence, and now, the day's real labour stands up and looks at you. Because this is Monday, and Monday, in every house on this street, in every mill town in this country, in this year and every year within living memory, means one thing. It means wash day. And when I say wash day, I need you to understand what that means in a house with no washing machine, no water heater, and no money. This isn't sorting lights and darks and pressing a button. This is the single heaviest day of physical labour in the week, done by hand, in a kitchen, by one woman, and it will take you until the middle of the afternoon. And by the end of it, your hands will look like you've been in a fight and your back will feel like you lost. But first, while the water starts heating, the hens. You go out the back door into the wet grey morning with the warm mash pail, and the 6 of them come off the roost complaining, and you go along the boxes. 4 eggs, then a 5th, still blood warm, and you hold that one a second in your cracked hand in the cold like a little stove. 4 for Prospect Street, 1 for the house. The hens get the mash, the potato peelings, the outer cabbage leaves, every crumb this kitchen sheds. Nothing is wasted, nothing is ever wasted. And in return they lay you dimes. You count the flock the way some women count pearls. Last winter a man 2 streets over lost his whole coop in one night, to a thief who took the birds and the wire both. And nobody blamed the thief out loud, which tells you what year it is. At the fence, Bertha Miller is standing at her clothes post in a man's coat over her apron, pinning her line before 7 like always, and she nods at your egg pail. Prospect Street pays you Friday, Saturday. Make it Friday. She jams a pin down. Saturday they'll have company for dinner and forget you till Monday, and cream sours faster than shame. Friday at the kitchen door, before noon. That's Bertha. 51 years old, raised 7 children on a puddler's pay, and she runs the economy of this block the way Morgan runs his bank. Except Bertha's bank has never once been shut. Her husband still has 2 days a week at the sheet mill, which on this street makes her a wealthy woman, and what she does with the margin is move it. A squash for a haircut, eggs for sewing thread, her boy's outgrown boots for your rhubarb, through every kitchen from the corner to the alley, keeping a ledger of it all in her head to the cent, and never once calling any of it charity. Wash day, she says, looking at the sky like she's reading a bill of lading. It'll hold dry till 3. Get your heavy things out first. She's never wrong about the sky. You go back in. The copper boiler is already on the stove 20 gallons across 2 lids, and the water for it does come out of a tap. The house has that much. But every drop that needs to be hot needs coal under it, so the stove will burn hot from now until 2 o'clock, which means the kitchen will be a laundry, a bakery and a small foundry all at once. You get out the washboard, the brown bars, the paring knife to shave them, the wringer that clamps to the rinse tubs, the bluing bottle, the starch pan, 60 feet of line and a bag of pins. You tie your hair, roll your sleeves past the elbow, and look for 1 second at your reflection, bent in the side of the copper boiler, a woman with a knife in one hand and a bar of soap in the other, gearing up like a man going down a mine. Then you start and the day closes over your head. The sorting comes first, on the kitchen floor, whites in one heap, coloured in another, work clothes, Frank's overalls, stiff with ash dust and old grease that no layoff has ever quite boiled out of them. In a third heap by the door, because they go in last. Into water everything else is already used. Water is not free. Hot water is coal. Everything in this kitchen is coal if you follow it far enough. The whites go into the boiler first, pushed down into water just short of scalding, with a sawed-off broom handle gone grey and soft as driftwood from years of this. You shave soap over them, fells naphtha, a nickel a bar, and the bar has to last 2 weeks, so the shavings are counted the way everything is counted, and then you stand over a copper vessel of near boiling cloth, stirring, lifting, turning, the steam climbing your arms and opening every crack in your knuckles like little red mouths. The smell of a wash kitchen is its own weather. Hot soap, wet cotton, the tarry naphtha bite that gets into bread if you don't cover the sponge, and under it the singed dust smell of a stove running hard at 8 in the morning. 10 minutes of boiling to an armful. Then the broom handle, the heave. 5 pounds of sheet weighs 15 soaked, and you lift it high and let it hang and drip and steam like something pulled from a river, and over to the first tub, onto the washboard. And the washboard is where wash day actually lives. Brass ridges in a wooden frame, and you take each piece and scrub it against the ridges, with your knuckles riding just behind the cloth, collar seams, cuff seams, the grey ring inside every neckband, Eddie's knees, June's everything. 20 strokes turn 20 strokes. Your knuckles skin themselves on the brass a little at a time, so slowly you stop noticing, until you see the pink in the rinse water and can't tell if it's bluing or you. Wring by hand once, then through the wringer. A beautiful machine, honestly. 2 rubber rollers and a crank clamped between the tubs. You feed each piece in flat while your right arm turns, and the water sheets out the back in a grey waterfall, and your shoulder learns the crank's arithmetic. Around 400 turns of that handle on a full wash day. You counted once, out of spite. Second tub to rinse. Third tub, the whites only, with a capful of bluing swirled in until the water is summer sky-coloured. Bluing doesn't clean a thing. It's an optical trick. A breath of blue that cancels yellow and makes old sheets read white on the line. And the line is the point, because the line is public. Every woman on this street can read every other woman's line like a newspaper. Grey sheets tell, unturned collars tell. A wash line is a bank statement hung out at nose height, and yours will say what it has always said. This house is poor and this house is clean, and you may draw no further conclusions. Starch for the school dresses and Frank's one good shirt, cooked up from flour and water like thin gravy. Then out, pail after pail to the line and pinning, wind snapping the wet sheets around you like sails, cold cloth slapping your face, wooden pins in your apron pocket and 2 in your teeth, 60 feet of rope filling up with the shapes of your whole family flattened and empty dancing. By noon your back has a crowbar in it. By 1 the work shirts are scrubbed and the porch rag rugs are done in the leftover grey water, and the grey water after that goes on the rhubarb. Because even used water has one more job in it. Nothing is wasted. Nothing is ever wasted. And here's what has to be understood, because the wash line won't say it and neither will she. There was a time, 3 years ago, when a wash day like this ran on more coal, more soap, more meat at the end of it. The labour isn't new. The labour was always this. What's new is that it now runs on nothing, that the soap is half, the coal is half, the dinner at the end of it is beans, and that it absolutely cannot be allowed to look like it runs on nothing. That's the added shift. Same mountain, thinner air. Dinner, midday, is bread and drippings and the bean pot pulled forward. And Frank comes in from the back lot where he's been all morning turning over the garden ground with a spading fork. 40 feet by 90, every foot of it going to food this year. No flowers. They argued about the flowers last spring and the flowers lost. all except one peony by the porch that you defended like a border dispute because a house with no single beautiful thing in it starts to believe what the year is telling it. He eats. He looks better than he did at dawn. Dirt does that for him. Dirt is the one work that always hires. And after he eats, he stands at the cellar door a moment and then goes down, and you hear him lift the lid of the coal bin and let it fall, checking, and you stop your hands so your ears can follow him, because the cellar is where this family's real bank is, and you know its balance better than Schaefer knows his. The coal bin may be £400. The potato bin, board-slotted across a corner, down to a sad knee-high heap gone soft and sprouting. April potatoes, ugly as toads and still food. The crock of sauerkraut near the bottom, smelling like a wet argument. And along the north wall, out of the furnace's reach, the shelf, the quartz shelf. Frank built it the first year in this house, 2 by lumber, 4 tiers, braced into the wall itself. And every September of your married life you have filled it, and every winter it has emptied like a slow clock. Tomatoes in quartz, red as jewellery. Green beans in quartz, packed standing up like soldiers. Peaches when peaches were possible. Peaches have not been possible for 2 years. Piccalilli, chow chow, apple butter, sealed under paraffin. In September there were 91 jars up there. You know because you counted them onto the shelf yourself, wrote 91 in the nickel notebook, and drew a box around it. It is the last week of April and there are 11. 9 of tomatoes, 1 of beans, 1 lone amber quart of apple butter that is being saved for something. No one has said what. 11 jars, and the garden Frank is digging won't feed anyone until July. That gap, the hungry gap, your grandmother called it, an old name for the oldest problem there is. That gap is 6 weeks wide, and you will cross it on beans and eggs and dandelions. Dandelions. Yes, that's this afternoon, in the hour between the last of the wash and the children coming home. You take a paring knife and a basket and go along the back fence line and the alley and the churchyard edge, and you cut dandelion greens, young ones before the flower, when they're only half bitter, a whole basketful, free as air, and you're not the only woman out cutting. You can look down the alley on an April afternoon and see 3 aprons bent in 3 different weed patches, and everyone waves, and nobody explains because no explanation is needed anywhere in this town. Boiled in 2 waters with a pinch of soda, dressed hot with bacon, grease and vinegar, dandelion greens are supper's whole vegetable, and the bulletins from the State College say, in print this year, that they carry more iron than spinach. The government has begun recommending weeds. You laughed the first time you read that, one short laugh, alone in the kitchen, and then you went out and cut the weeds, because iron is iron and free is free. The children bang home at 4. Eddie drops his books and is gone again with a coaster wagon. Down to the railroad embankment where the coal trains slow for the grade, and you know exactly what he does there because half the boys in town do it. He walks the cinder slope with a bucket and picks up what falls. Company coal, strictly speaking. Stolen, strictly speaking. The railroad police chase the men who climb the cars and mostly look away from the boys who glean the ditch, and every evening Eddie comes back with 15-20 pounds in the wagon bed, and the story in this kitchen, the official story, spoken once and never re-examined, is that it fell. It always fell. You have decided you believe it, and you've decided to keep believing it right up until the day you can afford not to, and you boil his supper over it either way. Helen sets the table without being told. June trailing her, putting each spoon down with terrible 4-year-old precision. Supper is beans, dandelion greens, bread, and the performance of plenty. The serving spoon that lands heavy on 4 plates and light on the 5th. Over at the stove, out of the light, Frank at the head of the table with his forearms brown from the garden, telling June that the worms in the turned ground this year are as long as her arm. June screaming with joy, Helen laughing, Eddie counting his day's coal out loud. £22, like a man reporting wages. You stand at the stove with your plate and watch them eat, and this right here is the whole profession. Not the beans, the noise. A table where the children still shout about worms is a solvent table, whatever the ledger says. Keeping it noisy, that's the work. Bertha said it to you once across the fence, flat as a skillet, the closest thing to a philosophy this street has ever needed. She said, "Never let a hungry street see the bottom of your pot." She meant the neighbours. You have decided it means everyone. It means the children. Some days it means Frank. Some days it even means you. After supper the dishes, the milk pan scalded for morning, the bread sponge set, the stove banked, small fire buried in ash to sleep till dawn, an art your hands do without you now, and the last hour by the lamp with the mending basket, because a wash day ends with a needle the way a battle ends with a burial detail. Every wash thing confesses its wounds wet, this sock's heel gone, that seam opened, Helen's hem hanging. You darn over the wooden egg, weave the needle through, turn socks that have been darned on top of darns until the heel is more darn than sock. 8 o'clock, past. The children up to bed, heard prayers, June's cold feet on your knees a minute first, because that is a tax you pay gladly. And then it is 9, and the lamp is turned down to a bead to save oil, and you sit 1 more minute in the almost dark doing what you do at the end of every single day of this year of your life. The count again backward this time. Eggs sold, dime saved, dollar owed, shoes holding, jars 11, coal £400, children fed, husband proud enough to sleep. The numbers come out the way they came out yesterday. Enough. Barely, exactly, deliberately enough. 16 hours since the ash sieve. Tomorrow is ironing day. The sad irons are already standing on the stove ledge like 3 black hens. And Wednesday is baking day, and Thursday is Mr. Gandy and the upstairs floors, and Friday is Prospect Street and the marketing, and Saturday is baths and the Saturday scrubbing, and Sunday is church and the big dinner, and the collar you need to turn on Frank's good shirt, and then it is Monday, and the boiler goes back on the stove. Nobody calls it a job. There is no word for it at all except the word everybody uses, the word the census uses, the flattest word in the language. Housewife. Keeping house. As if the house were a small quiet thing that mostly kept itself. You blow out the lamp. Upstairs, Frank is already breathing slow. You lie down in the dark beside him with your hands stinging faintly from soap and brass, and somewhere down the valley a single locomotive works the grade, pulling somebody's coal somewhere, and you do the last arithmetic of the day, the one you never write down, 1 day crossed, 1 day closer to the garden, 1 more week to Thursday's dime, and then, for a few hours, mercifully, nothing is asked of you at all. The week unrolls the way the week always unrolls, because the week is the one machine in this valley still running full time. Tuesday you iron, 7 pounds of hot metal in your fist, 3 sad irons rotating on the stove ledge so there's always one at heat. Spit sizzling off the face to test it. the smell of hot cotton and scorched starch. 2.5 hours of pressing other people's decency into cloth. Wednesday you bake, 4 loaves and a pan of cornbread. The kitchen briefly rich with the one smell that makes even this year feel survivable. And Thursday, at 2:30, comes the knock that structures the week like a church bell. Mr. Gandy, collection day. You could set the clock by him, and half the street does. A narrow man in a brown suit gone shiny at the seams, a leather debit book under his arm, swollen fat as a Bible, with the whole neighbourhood's dimes and nickels written in it, week by week, going back years. He has walked this same route since before the war, the old war, and he has seen this street flush and seen it broke and collected at both altitudes, 10 cents at a time, rain and shine, and buried half his book's names personally, standing at the back of funerals that his dimes paid for. You have the dime ready on the clock shelf. You always have the dime ready. There are weeks it is the last dime in the sugar bowl, and it still sits there Thursday morning, set aside like a hostage, untouchable, because the dime is not groceries. The dime is the wall. Mrs. He steps just inside the door, wipes his feet whether they need it or not, takes the dime and makes the 2 marks, one in the fat book and one punch through the little buff card. Click, week 17. Then, because he is Mr. Gandy, he stands 1 minute exactly and delivers the street to you like a paper. Kowalski's boy has the measles, but it's going light. The Fabers took in her sister's family from Akron. 8 in 4 rooms now. Coleman's dropping his price a quarter-ton in June. Hold till June. And you tell Frank, he says at the door, settling his hat. The ice house lost a man to Cleveland. Friday mornings they'll want somebody strong. 6 o'clock ask for Rudy. He says it mild, looking at the middle distance, the way he says everything. This man who walks 40 miles a week through the wreckage of a steel economy, carrying a bag of dimes, who knows before anyone which houses are about to go under, because the first thing a drowning family drops is the dime, and who has quietly rebuilt his route a dozen times to walk the bad news to the right back doors an hour before it turns official. You said to him once, second winter of the hard times, when he punched the card. Some weeks, I don't know why I keep this up over everything else, and Mr. Gandy looked at the card and looked at you and said the thing you have thought about probably once a week since. A dime a week isn't insurance, Mrs. He tapped the card square with one finger. It's proof you still believe in next year. And he punched it, click, and wished you good afternoon. Friday you carry the eggs to Prospect Street before noon, like Bertha said. And Friday afternoon is the marketing, which means Sam Aldo's, which means the book. Aldo's grocery is 18 feet wide and smells of coffee, brine, kerosene and cat. Sam runs it alone since his boy went west on a freight. 19 years old, gone with 2 other boys from the parish, riding out of the yards at night toward a rumour of work in the wheat states, and Sam straightens a little every time a letter comes, which is not often. Behind Sam's counter, on a nail, hangs the other great ledger of this street, twin to Bertha's head and Gandy's debit book, the credit book. Families by name, page by page, groceries taken against money that comes later or doesn't. Sam carries 30 families in that book. Sam is owed at this moment something over $600, which is more money than Sam has, which means the poorest street in town is technically being financed by a man who cuts his own bologna thin to make the stick last. Mrs. Anna, he weighs your trade out with the book open. beans, £25. Flour. The gold medal's 92, but the Larrabee's 85, and it bakes the same. I'll say it before you ask. He always says it before you ask. You take the Larrabee. Soup meat is 8 cents a pound, and you take £2 and stretch it into 3 days. Oleo, 10 cents. A nickel bar of soap. Salt. Matches. The kerosene can filled. It comes to $1.61 against the book, and you put 90 cents of it in coins on the counter, which is more than he expected and less than you owed, which is the exact grammar of the book. The sentence everybody's book says every Friday. I have not paid you. I will pay you. Look at me paying you what exists. Sam marks it, and then he does the thing he does, the thing that is never called anything. He wraps the soup bones. Big shin bones split with marrow, worth soup all by themselves, and puts them on top of the parcel. For the dog, he says. There is no dog. There has never been a dog. You say thank you for the dog's sake, and he says tell Frank there's crates out back if he wants kindling, and the whole transaction, debt and gift and dignity, closes over itself smooth as water, the way it does every Friday, in every grocery like this one, in every town like this one, where the difference between commerce and mercy has quietly stopped being visible to the naked eye. Saturday night, after the baths, one kettle-warm tub in the kitchen, youngest to oldest, you last, in water with the day's whole family in it. You lay out the Sunday clothes, and that is when the coat finally comes to the top of the pile, the thing you have been circling for 2 weeks. Frank's overcoat. Grey herringbone wool, bought new for $11 in 1923, the year Eddie was 3 and the mills ran so hard the sky over the valley burned orange all night like a permanent sunset, and nobody in this town could imagine the furnaces any other way. 9 years old now. Frank stopped wearing it 2 winters ago when the elbows went. Since then it has hung on the cellar stairs like a man waiting for a verdict. And Eddie has no winter coat that fits. Grew clean out of the old Mackinaw by March. And next winter is coming, because winter is always coming, and there is a boy's overcoat in that man's overcoat, the way there's a statue in a block of stone. It's called cutting down, and your mother did it, and her mother did it, and there's a whole chapter on it now in the state extension bulletins, making the old coat new. Because the government has finally noticed what women always knew, that cloth, real wool cloth, doesn't wear out. Surfaces wear out. Cloth goes on. Sunday afternoon, dinner done, you begin, and it is surgery and you know it. You take the razor blade and open every seam of that coat. Shoulder, side, sleeve, collar. Not cutting the cloth, cutting only the thread. Hundreds of stitches popping one at a time with a sound like a tiny fence failing, until a man's coat lies on the kitchen table as flat pieces of geometry. And inside, where the weather never reached, the wool is perfect, unfaded, the grey of 1923. You turn every piece, worn face in, protected face out, and chalk Eddie's measurements onto the good side, cutting the boy's coat out of the man's coat, shoulders from shoulders, the skirt of it from the back panel, and you save every scrap. The collar felt, the buttons, the satin of the lining where it isn't shattered, because the scraps are next year's patches and June's mittens and a cap. It will take you 3 weeks of evenings, this coat. Tonight is only the taking apart. But when you sweep up the thread bits and fold the flat grey pieces away in the basket, you notice you're doing something with your jaw that you haven't done in a while. You check it twice before you believe it. You're humming. Because here is a thing nobody tells you about this year, this profession, this whole broken, frightened country. The work that saves you is also, some hours, the only thing that feels like power. Money is a weather now. It happens to you. It comes or it doesn't like rain. But a coat opened flat on a table and turned wrong side right by your own two hands, that obeys. That comes out exactly as good as you are. And you permit yourself to think it once a year. Very good. Frank comes through the kitchen for water and stops. He looks at the pieces of his coat laid out like a pattern for a smaller life. And he stands there a moment and you brace. Because there are men on this street who could not watch this, who would hear it as one more thing stripped off them. And Frank puts his finger on the inside wool, the bright protected grey, and rubs it like a buyer. Huh. A pause. Better side than all along. All along, you say. He nods, slow, and drinks his water, and at the door he says, not quite turning, he'll look like something in that. And that is Frank's whole speech, the entire address. But you have been married 14 years and you can translate it out to its full length, which is, I cannot buy my son a coat, and it turns out my son will have a coat anyway. And the reason is you, and I don't know how to stand in this kitchen and say so. Icehouse. Friday mornings comes through. Rudy takes Frank on, 6 to noon, 75 cents, hauling 300-pound blocks with tongs down into sawdust dark. And so the ledger for May steadies, $5 some weeks, 6 once, egg money climbing a nickel at a time in the flour tin, $4.60 becoming $5.10. The garden comes up in ruled green lines, lettuce first, then the feathery carrot rows, then the beans breaking ground overnight like a rumour, all of it patrolled by June, who has appointed herself sheriff of the peas, and you would almost let your shoulders down some warm evenings, except that everything, all of it, sits on top of the arithmetic like a house on a cracked footing, and you know the crack is there, and its name is winter. 11 jars became 9 in the hungry gap, then 7. The coal bin has to be rebuilt before October, $6.50 a ton, 2 tons minimum. School shoes, twice by September. And under all of it, never said at the table the number that governs the numbers, the mills. Frank walks past the work some evenings, not on purpose, the way you'd walk past a hospital where somebody you love is lying. Great black sheds 1/4 mile long, cold stacks. Windows the boys have started on with rocks. One furnace in the whole valley showing smoke and that one thin. In the barber shop and the papers, men keep saying the corner is right ahead, prosperity is right around it. They have been saying it for 3 years, and this spring, in the year of our Lord 1932, 1/4 of the working men in this country are not working, 1 in 4, and in steel valleys like this one it is worse than that, and everybody has stopped saying the word temporary. You know none of the big numbers yet, not the way the books will print them later. You only know your street. But your street is a good instrument. 8 houses of it that you can see from the clothesline, and you can read them like the ledger. The Fabers doubled up. The Kowalski's curtains gone. Sold. Cut down for dresses. Bertha's husband down from 2 days to 1.5. Sam's book fattening. The paper behind your clock still folded, and the quartz shelf standing half empty in the cool dark under the whole house, like a question the summer has to answer. So when the true heat comes, you answer it. July and August in that kitchen are a campaign that would break a strong man, and I can say that with confidence because strong men have watched it and said so. Canning season. The 6 weeks when a housewife converts a 40 by 90 backlot into a winter, jar by jar, over a coal range, in a kitchen that reaches 105 degrees by 10 in the morning. Understand the machine you're running. Every quart that goes on that cellar shelf must be picked, washed, trimmed, blanched, packed, capped, and then boiled in the water bath kettle. 3 hours for beans, because the extension bulletins are blunt about spoilage and the graveyard has old proof of what a bad jar can do. And the kettle holds 7 quarts a load, and the stove must roar the whole time in July with the windows shimmering. You strip the beds to their sheets at dawn. You send June and Helen out picking into dishpans while the dew is still on, and by 7 the kitchen assembly line is moving. Helen snapping beans at the table, tips and strings in a bowl for the hens, June matching zinc lids to jars with the fierce concentration of a bank examiner. You at the stove in a wet-collared dress, hair stuck to your neck, hands moving in the steam, tomatoes scalded and slipped from their skins by the bushel, so much acid on your hands that your cracked thumb reopens and stings all August, the paraffin smell of sealing wax on the apple butter, the pop of lids sealing on the windowsill at night, one then another, little kisses in the dark, each one a day of February surrendering in advance. Bertha's kitchen runs the same weeks, and the two of you pool like armies merging supply lines. Her pressure canner the only one on the street does your corn. Your bigger tomato patch pays the rent on it in quarts. Her cousin's farm out the valley road sells windfall peaches at 40 cents a bushel for what has bruises. And one blazing Saturday you and she put up 31 quarts of peaches between 2 stoves and drink cold well water on her porch steps after. Too tired to talk, hands dyed yellow, 4 dozen jars cooling in rows behind you like ingots. Because that is what they are. Say it plainly. In the year 1932, on this street, a quart jar of home-canned tomatoes is currency, better than currency, can't fail, can't be foreclosed, holds its value against every headline. When women here say wealth, they do not mean the funny paper kind, they mean shelves. You will hear a woman say of another with real respect she put up 200 quarts, in the exact tone their grandmother said she brought 80 acres to the marriage. And on the evening in late August, when you carry the year's count down cellar and set the last jars up on Frank's shelving, and write the number in the nickel notebook, 109, and draw the box around it, you stand there in the cool earth smell with the lamp, looking at 4 tiers of glass glowing red and green and amber like a church window laid on its side, and you feel something you have not felt in 2 years, and do not say out loud even to yourself in case the year hears you. You feel rich. It is the same summer. You will keep the 2 things together in your memory forever, the peach steam and the radio, that the war comes to Washington. The last Thursday of July, Collection Day, Mr. Gandy at the door with a dime book, and he doesn't deliver the street this time. He says, "Has Bertha's set been on?" And something in how he says it sends you across the fence lots at 7 that evening, into Bertha's front room, where the neighbourhood is already sitting. Bertha's husband bought the radio in 1928, a Philco in a cathedral cabinet, when the sheet mill ran double turns. It would fetch nothing now. Second-hand radios are being sold on every curb in America. So it stays, the one fat year possession left in the room, and on this street it has become a public utility. 14 people are in that room, and on the porch through the screen door, and the radio is telling, in the flat, careful voice of the announcer, what happened in Washington the day before, the 28th of July, 1932. How the Bonus Army, and everybody in this room knows what the Bonus Army is. It is veterans. It is 20,000 men who fought in France asking early payment of the bonus certificates the government promised them, camped all summer with their wives and children in shacks on the Anacostia flats. How the army, The real one, with cavalry and tanks and gas, moved on the camps by evening, and the shacks burned, and you could see the fire from the White House. The room is silent in a way you know. It's church silence. Frank stands against the wall with his arms crossed and his jaw set, and Bertha's husband, who was at Saint Mihiel, sits leaning forward with his forearms on his knees, staring at the carpet, and nobody says anything for a long time, and then an old man by the window says, to nobody, soldiers on soldiers. That's the whole editorial this street produces. But walking home in the dark between the gardens, Frank says one thing, quiet, half to himself, and it is the closest he will come all year to a political speech. They had their families in there, Anna. Somebody's wife was cooking supper in that camp. A woman at a stove in a shack city, feeding children on nothing, doing, you understand him instantly, your exact job at the capital's edge, and the answer she got was cavalry. Nobody in that radio room says the word election. Nobody has to. It is 3 months off, and something in the country has quietly finished turning, and even the kitchen can feel it. September brings school, and school brings the two problems September always brings, and this year they interlock like gears, money and cloth. The money problem gets its answer first, and the answer sleeps in the front room. It's Bertha, naturally, who brokers it, leaning on the fence with the manner she uses for moving squash. The new school teacher, Miss Carey, Helen's Miss Carey, has lost her room at Faber's, what with the Akron sisters' family filling the house, and is walking from Clear across town, and is, Bertha pronounces, a clean, quiet, Methodist sort of girl, and you have a front room and a daybed doing nothing but holding air. A boarder. You and Frank talk it over in the dark that night in the low voices you save for money, and the arithmetic argues louder than either of you. $4 a week, board and room. $4 certain. Well, certain-ish. Half of it lately in tax scrip, but Sam Aldo has started taking the scrip at 90 cents on the dollar against the book, holding the paper himself and betting on the county, so even the scrip spends. $4 is coal, $4 is shoes, and the doctor if the doctor comes. Against it, a stranger at your table, your family's thin suppers witnessed daily by an outside pair of eyes, the bottom of the pot public at last. Pride argues about 10 minutes. Winter wins, the way winter wins every argument this year, and the following Sunday, Miss Adeline Carey moves in. 1 trunk, 1 hat box, a stack of books tied with a strap, and a rubber plant she carries herself like a baby, 24 years old, back straight as yardstick. And she turns out, you'd fight anyone who pretended surprise but you were surprised, to be no burden at all but a kind of dividend. She keeps her room like a ship's cabin. She insists on drying the supper dishes, overriding your protest with schoolroom firmness, and the two of you settle into a nightly shift at the sink that becomes, without either of you naming it, the hour when the day gets talked over. And she takes on Eddie, because Eddie, 12 and a half now, coal gleaner, paper hawker, furious arithmetic of a boy, has begun saying at supper that a boy he knows from the flats quit school for the bowling alley at $3 a week, saying it and watching his father sideways, and the kitchen goes tight every time. It's Miss Carey who answers it one October evening, dish towel in hand without raising her voice. Eddie, the mills will hire again some day, and when they do, the men who can figure will run the crews that the men who can't will sweat in. $3 this winter or the crew some day, that's the whole choice. Take a night and pick. Then she goes back to the plates. Eddie stares at her and takes the night and picks school. proud enough, you notice, to pretend forever after that it was his own idea, which is exactly how she built it. The cloth problem is Helen's, and it is the sharpest small wound of the fall. Helen has outgrown her school dress. Outgrown both, truthfully, but one can be let down. There's a 2-inch hem to pay out, and the other must be replaced, and there is no 50 cents for dress goods. And so the answer is the answer every family on this street already wears, and Helen knows it. And Helen, 8 years old, standing in the kitchen, says the sentence she has clearly been rehearsing. Alma Faber says you can tell the flour sack girls at recess. Flour sacks, feed sacks. 49 pounds of Larrabee's comes in a cotton sack, and that cotton is good yard goods, better weave than some of what the beehive sells, and every woman in this town saves them, bleaches the brand lettering out with lye and long boiling. Some print washes out easy, some fights. The trick, traded fence to fence like all the tricks, is kerosene on the ink before the first boil, and sews them into dish towels, pillow slips, underwear, aprons and dresses for exactly such girls as Helen. And here's what's begun happening this very year, out in the mills that weave the sacks. A small commercial miracle you will not learn the full history of for decades. The sack makers have noticed the women. Noticed that the housewife choosing between 2 brands of flour will choose the prettier bag. And the first printed sacks have started coming through. No lettering on some now, but tiny flowers, checks, a rose sprig on cream, cloth designed in a boardroom somewhere to become a poor girl's dress with its head held up. Sam Aldo, who misses nothing, has begun stacking his flour with the pattern showing. So you take Helen's wound seriously, which is the whole art of mothering in a hard year. Never tell a child the true size of a thing she's carrying. You walk her to Aldo's yourself on a Friday and let her choose the sacks. 2 of the rose sprig, 1 plain for the yoke facings, and you sew that dress by lamplight over a week of evenings, French seams, a real collar, buttons off the shattered lining of the herringbone coat. Mother of pearl, saved in the tin, waiting 2 months for exactly this. And when Helen puts it on that Sunday, even Eddie looks up from his plate, and Alma Faber at recess on Monday asks where the dress came from a store or where. And Helen, you get this from Miss Carey, who watched the whole engagement from the schoolhouse steps with, she admits, unprofessional satisfaction. Helen smooths the skirt of it, rose sprigs on cream, and says, "My mother made it. My mother can make anything." You cry exactly once that fall, and it is not over money, and it is that sentence, and you do it alone in the cellar, 1 minute by the quart shelf with your wrist against your mouth, and then you wipe your face on your apron and go back up the stairs, because it is Wednesday, and Wednesday is baking day. The 8th of November 1932 is a Tuesday, grey and mild, and the polling place is the fire hall, and this street votes the way it does everything now, in a body, on foot, wearing its good clothes. You go at 10 between the ironing and the dinner with Bertha, and the line is out the door. Men who have not had a reason to put on a collar in a year have put on a collar. Frank went at 7, first thing, and came home and said nothing, but he'd shaved for it. Nobody on this street says the name Hoover anymore. The word has gone off like milk. The shack towns down by every city's rail yards are called Hoovervilles. An empty pocket turned inside out is a Hoover flag, and the men trade these with a bitterness so worn it's almost comfortable. What they say about the other man, the governor of New York with the long cigarette holder, is careful, superstitious, hedged. They've been promised corners before, but they went at 7, and they shaved. The returns come over Bertha's Philco that night. The front room packed again, June asleep against your shoulder, and by 10:30 it isn't close, and everybody knows it isn't close. It will finish 42 states to 6. And there is no cheering in that room. That's the thing you remember after. No cheering. When it's certain, the men nod, slow, the way they'd nod at a jury coming back, and Bertha's husband turns the dial down, and people start finding their coats. On the porch, in the cold, Mr. Gandhi, even Gandhi came, dimeless, off-duty, a citizen tonight, settles his hat and says the street's whole verdict in one line. Well, now he has to do it. Whatever it is. Nobody knows what it is. The man himself won't take office for 4 months. That's the old schedule, the last long interregnum, March 4th. And between this November night and that March morning stands one more winter, with nothing at the wheel of the country but a beaten man and the weather. This street has just voted its hope like a crop planted in the fall. Now it has to winter over, and that winter comes in hard, and it comes for your kitchen through the cellar door and the meter. The gas goes first, not yours, Bertha's. You find it out on a Monday in early December, going over with the borrowed pressure canner, finally coming home, and the moment you're through her kitchen door you know, because the knowing is on your skin. The room is cold, and there's a smell of coal oil, and a 2-burner kerosene stove is sitting up on the range of that proud kitchen like a tin insult. The company shut her line Friday. Her husband's mill went from a day and a half to closed till further notice in November, and Bertha of the fence, Bertha of the peaches, Bertha who has carried half this street's slack for 3 years in her head and never dropped a cent of it. Bertha got behind like anybody, and the company man came with his wrench like he does, and she tells you all this in about 9 words, chin level, daring you to arrange your face wrong. We'll be square by March. It's soup weather anyhow. Never let a hungry street see the bottom of your pot. She taught you the law, and now she's living under it. And what you do next, you do very carefully, because helping Bertha is diffusing a shell. You don't offer. Offering is the insult. Instead, Thursday, you show up at her door with the big enamel kettle and a problem. Your oven, you claim, runs too hot for the Christmas fruit cakes. The war cake kind. No eggs, no butter, raisins boiled soft, the recipe the last hard times taught everybody's mother, and hers being coal is steadier, and would she bake them in trade for 2 quarts of peaches? Her stove is coal, same as yours. Your oven runs fine, and she knows it, and she knows you know, and the whole fiction stands there between you on the doorstep in plain sight, correctly built. So she takes the kettle. 2 quarts is high, she says, 1 in the beans. And her kitchen is warm that afternoon on your coal with cakes in it, and her pride never touches the ground, and that, write it in the ledger no one keeps, is what the women of this street do all day. That is the profession. The barter isn't squash for haircuts. It's dignity. Move from the house that has some to spare into the house that's run short, packed so it travels without breaking. The electric goes second, and it's yours. $2.40 in arrears, 3rd notice orange, and the man at the door in January with his pliers, apologetic. He does 40 of these a week now. He's got the face of a man who digs graves. And then the meter is sealed, and the switches are dead, and you're a kerosene house entire, like your mother's was. Lamps to fill and trim, and a smell in every room like 1905 came back. The children take it as an adventure for about 5 days. Frank takes it the other way. The night it happens, he sits at the table under the lamp not reading, and then he says to his hands, 14 years I wired armatures, my own house. And there it is, The thing the shut-off really cuts, not the light. The story a man tells about what his work was for. You are ready for this one because you have been watching him lose altitude since November, and you have learned that what pulls him level is never comfort. Comfort he reads as pity, and pity he reads as verdict. It's assignment. So you don't say it's all right, Frank. You say, the cellar stairs are black as a mine and I'm on them 20 times a day. I need a rail and a shelf at the turn for the lamp to sit on where it can't tip. Work. Specification. A thing his hands can hold. He's down there the whole next day with the crate lumber and the good chisel, and the rail he builds you would pass inspection at the works, mortised, sanded round for a wet hand, and the little lamp shelf has a raised lip so the base can't slide. A detail nobody asked for, a machinist's detail. And for a week afterward his footsteps on the stairs sound different. You couldn't give him wages, you gave him tolerances. And Christmas. Christmas 1932, the bottom's own Christmas. You rig like a stage manager with no budget and a full house. It is the vinegar pie principle applied to an entire holiday. A tree. Because Eddie and the wagon and the hill farm solve that for the price of asking. Strings of popcorn, paper chains from the Sunday funnies that Miss Carey saves you off her school papers. In the stockings, an orange each. One actual orange apiece. 5 cents apiece at Aldo's. The year's single unstretched luxury. And June holds hers with 2 hands like a lantern and smells it before she'll even peel it. Mittens for all 3 out of the herringbone scraps and ravelled sweater yarn. For Helen, a doll bed Frank built in the cellar in secret from crate wood, with a mattress you quilted from sack corners. For Eddie, from the pawn shop, 40 cents, a real micrometer with F, another man's initials worn into the case, which Eddie, who watched his father's trade get erased and has pretended for a year not to care, opens and goes entirely still, and then wordlessly puts in his coat pocket, inside pocket, flat against his chest where it stays more or less permanently. And for you, conspiracy of Frank and children and border, a bottle of hand lotion, glycerin and rose water, 35 cents, for the cracked hands everyone in this house has watched work all year and nobody has mentioned because mentioning is not done. Miss Carey eats Christmas dinner with the family, a hen. Yes, one of your 6, the oldest, past laying, and you kill and dress and roast her yourself the way farm-raised women can, and you do not tell the children which one until it's eaten, and you count the arithmetic of it without flinching, because a hen past laying is 4 dimes a feed a year against no eggs, and sentiment is a fat year expense. Stuffed with bread and onions, she feeds 7 with soup in the carcass for 2 days more. Nothing is wasted, nothing is ever wasted. At the table, over the bones, Frank raises his coffee cup half an inch off the cloth. This is for Franken oration, and says, "Well, we're all here." 4 words. And round that table in that lamplight in that year, you understand it as the complete and unabridged text of the only toast that matters. 5 families on this street cannot say those words tonight. The Kowalskis can't. Their oldest is in Toledo, living nobody knows how. Sam Aldo can't. The letters from the wheat state stopped in October. The country is full of tables with the chair gone, men riding freights, families broken up and boarded out, children in aunts' houses in other states. We're all here. It is the whole fortune of this house. You look around it once, slowly, everybody's faces orange in the kerosene light, and you bank the image the way you bank the stove, a live coal buried against the morning. Because January is coming, and in the nickel notebook, in the cold columns of it, You already know what January says. Coal 1 ton short, jars 41. Frank's Icehouse Fridays suspended. The ice trade sleeps in winter. The egg money stands at $7.10, the highest it has ever stood, and it stands there like a sandbag against a river you can hear rising. The last thing you do that Christmas night, after the lamps are out, is stand a moment in the dark kitchen, hand in the flour tin, touching the cold zinc lid. The jar stays. Whatever comes, the jar stays. January 1933 arrives like a bill collector. The cold comes down the valley in the second week and sets in flat and blue, 0 at dawn for days running. The kind of cold where the nails in the siding pop like far-off shots in the night, and the frost builds fern gardens on the inside of the window glass, on the inside, and June's wash rag freezes to the sill. The house shrinks to the kitchen. Everybody's life is lived within 12 feet of the range. Homework at the table, mending by the lamp, the door to the shut-off front room closed and a rolled rug against the draught under it. Beds warmed at night with the flat irons wrapped in flannel, run upstairs glowing like ingots. Miss Carey grades her papers in fingerless gloves. Helen watches with envy until you knit her a pair from unravelled sock tops. And then every female in the household has them, and you all sit around the lamp of an evening looking like a den of small, careful thieves. And now the coat, the herringbone, the surgery of last spring, now the coat fires, and it fires every single morning at 6:30, when Eddie puts it on in the kitchen and goes out into that iron dark to walk his paper route and then the embankment before school. Grey wool to his knees, collar up around his ears, the good protected face of 9-year-old cloth turned out against 0 weather, and it holds. Other boys on the embankment that January are picking coal in sweaters over sweaters, in men's suit jackets with the sleeves rolled, and your boy walks the cinder slope warm to the skin in his father's coat rebuilt by his mother's hands, and pulls the wagon home through the blue dawn with 25-30 pounds a day now, because a cold snap shakes more coal loose, and everybody knows it and the slope is crowded. The coal Eddie gleans that month is not a chore anymore. Count it in the ledger like money, because it is money. Something near £400 across the cold snap. Call it $1.30 that the winter tried to take and one 12-year-old in a turned coat took back. It's the same stretch of January, and you will not learn this for years. He will die with it undelivered. It will surface at his funeral when the neighbourhood women finally compare their books, that you fail Thursday for the first time. It is the week the electric arrears got paid to have the ceiling lifted, plus half soles at last for Helen, 85 cents, no more cardboard, the arithmetic simply arriving where arithmetic arrives, and on Thursday morning there is no dime for the clock shelf. There is the jar upstairs, yes, $7.10. And you stand in front of the flour tin that morning a long minute, hand on the lid, and you do not open it, because the jar is not for Thursdays. The jar is for the disaster, the true one, the one with a doctor or a sheriff in it, and if you crack it for a dime, it will bleed dimes till it's air. And when Mr. Gandy knocks at 2:30, you open the door and tell him straight, no dressing on it. Not this week, Mr. Gandy. And Mr. Gandy looks at you exactly 1 second, and then he does something small with his pencil, a tick. Not the strong line you've seen him make at other doors, and he punches the card, click, same as ever, and says, "Weeks marked, missus, cold enough for you," and delivers the street, Kowalski boys over the measles, hold your coal order, price breaks again in March, and is gone down the walk with his fat book under his arm, marked not missed, marked. What you don't know, standing in the door watching his narrow brown back going away up the frozen street, is that the dime went into the book from his own pocket, and that it was not the only dime on that street that winter that did, and that the debit men of that era, some of them the walk the route 30 years kind, carried their books through the worst of it exactly that way, quietly, against every company rule, because a punched card was a wall, and they knew it was a wall, and they would not be the ones to pull a family's wall down over 10 cents in January. You pay him back the next Thursday, 2 dimes on the shelf, and neither of you says one word about it, and the card in its buff cardboard goes on filling up week by week, click by click, unbroken. The quart shelf spends that January like a lung in cold air. You go down the cellar stair, hand on Frank's rail, lamp on Frank's little lipped shelf at the turn, and the count you wrote at Christmas, 41, becomes 36, becomes 30, because a snowed-in week with school lunches and no Icehouse Fridays leans on the shelf, and the shelf is what bends. You do the thing the budget women in Washington would approve, and every housewife does by instinct anyway. Ration by arithmetic. 60 days to the first true garden greens. 30 jars. A jar every other day and not one lid more. And on the between days it's the crock kraut and the sprouting potatoes and beans. Beans and dumplings riding on top of everything, flour and water and a scrap of fat. 'Cause dumplings are how a woman makes a pot look deeper than it is. February suppers are an engineering discipline. You feed 5 and a border on a nickel a plate and some nights under it, and the plates go out full looking and come back clean, and only the pot and you know the truth of the house, and the pot doesn't talk and neither do you. But here is the cost line, the one that never gets entered anywhere, and rule number 1 in this kitchen is honesty about the books, so enter it now. The woman keeping those plates full is running herself on the margin of the margin. Coffee and bread at dawn, the pot's thin end at noon. The stove-standing supper, always last, always least. It has been a year of eating like this, and the year has been keeping its own ledger on you. The dresses that hang differently, taken in twice at the waist since spring. The cold that starts at your feet now and never fully leaves till May. The 10 o'clock tilt of the kitchen floor that you stand still for, hand flat on the table counting to 8. And in the second week of February the floor tilts further than usual, on wash day of course, over the steam, and the next thing that happens in your day is Miss Carey's voice very close, and the pattern of the kitchen ceiling, which you have never once in 11 years had occasion to study from below. 40 seconds maybe. No doctor. You're up and stirring the boiler again before the argument even convenes, and you win it by the oldest manoeuvre in your repertoire, which is continuing to work while everyone else is still discussing. But that evening Miss Carey dries plates beside you in a silence with a shape to it, and finally sets the towel down and says, "Schoolroom flat, eyes ahead." In my classroom I can tell which mothers are skipping meals by which children look worried. A pause. Helen watches you eat now. Thought you'd want the intelligence. And she picks up the towel again. Nothing else. Surgical. And from that night there is a change in the kitchen that is never announced. Frank, who has taken to noticing things since the coat, begins finding reasons to be at the stove when the plates go out, and the 5th plate comes to the table now, filled by his hand, and the official story. Nobody's fooled. The story's load-bearing anyway. Is that he likes to serve. You sit down to supper with your family through the end of that winter. It cost the pot a real fraction. It is worth more than it costs, and for once in this hard year, Everyone at the table is pretending in your direction. And all this while, this is the part you can't see from the kitchen, though the kitchen will feel it soon enough, the country's blood is quietly stopping in its veins. You get it in fragments, the way the street gets everything. Gandhi's Thursday bulletins, the shared evening paper, the Philco when the neighbourhood gathers. Banks. Banks have been failing in ones and twos the whole hard times. Everybody knows somebody who lost a savings book somewhere. But this winter the failing changes weather. Depositors in this state, in every state, standing in lines around the block, not spending, not trusting, drawing out cash and putting it where you put yours. Jars, mattresses, coat linings. The lines make more lines. Fear compounds like interest. And on the 14th of February, Valentine's Day, the paper does not note the joke. The governor of Michigan closes every bank in that state by proclamation. All of them, sound and sick alike, 8 days, so the sick ones can't bleed out through the doors. A whole state's money stopped between one morning and the next. Detroit is 3 hours up the road. Half this street has kin there, auto workers, and the letters that come back are prompt and stunned. Payday in scrip or postponed, grocers cutting off credit, a city of 1.5 million learning in 1 week to live the way this street has lived for 3 years, without cash, on barter and books and trust. Bertha reads her cousin's letter out loud at the fence, mittened hands, breath smoking, and at the end of it she folds it back into the envelope and issues the street's analysis. 5 words precise as a shell. Now they know how anyway. Frank comes in from the yard that evening and stands by the stove a while, and then, not looking at you, looking at the clock, he says, "Anna, that paper still back there?" The kitchen goes very quiet. 11 months that paper has stood folded behind the clock, folded in quarters, never once mentioned by either of you out loud, both of you dusting around it like a loaded thing. It's there, he nods, slow at the clock. "Leave it lay," he says. "But," and the but hangs a long time, a machinist choosing a tolerance. "Know what it says, that's all. Winter like this. A body should know what a paper says before the day he needs it." So the next morning, alone in the kitchen, 10 minutes to 7, you take it down and unfold it flat on the oilcloth, and you read every line of it twice. The way you read a pattern before cutting cloth you can't replace. County emergency relief. Name of the head of household. Former employer. Former wage. Number of dependents. Ages. Assets. Home owned or rented. Equity. Insurance policies in force. Livestock kept. Has applicant relatives able to assist? Then you fold it on its old creases and put it back behind the clock. And you stand there a minute, and here is the strange true thing. The thing the oral histories will all say in their 100 different kitchens' voices. It does not feel like surrender to know what it says. It feels like the ash sieve, like the jar. One more thing counted before it's needed. Assets. 5 hens, 1 jar, $7.10, 1 card, punch to date, 1 shelf, 26 quarts, 1 street, solvent in everything but cash. Whatever is coming, and by the last week of February even the kitchen can hear it coming. The way you can hear a train in the rail before ever a light shows down the line. This house will meet it counted. It comes in the first 2 weeks of March, and it is the strangest thing that happens in this entire story. Stranger than anything a war delivers, because wars have precedents. What happens in March of 1933 is that the money stops. Not your money. You barely have money. You have hens and jars and a book at Aldo's. The money, the idea itself. For 1 week, the richest country on the face of the earth does not have a working dollar in it. And here is what nobody tells you in the histories with the marble men on the covers. The people who carried the country across that week, hand over hand, were storekeepers with credit books and women with hidden jars. The kitchens had been rehearsing for 3 years. When the whole nation's kitchen caught fire, it was the housewives who already knew where everything was. It starts as radio and rumour. Through the last days of February, the bank lines in the cities grow into the paper's front pages. State after state follows Michigan. Holidays, restrictions, withdrawals capped at 5%, until by the 3rd of March, a Friday, the governors have shut or shackled the banks in nearly every state in the Union, and the men at Aldo's counter say the word holiday with a twist on it like a knife in a cork. Your own bank, the one downtown with the granite front where the Christmas Club account died in 1931, and Frank has kept $2 in a checking account ever since purely so as to be a man with a bank account, locks its doors Saturday with a typed card in the window, by order, and men stand on the sidewalk in front of it all morning, not in a line, just standing, hats down, looking at the granite the way they look at the dead mills. And Saturday noon, the 4th of March, the whole street is in Bertha's front room again, and the Philco is turned up, and out of it, through static, from the east portico of the Capitol in a cold Washington wind, comes the new voice. You're standing against the wall with June heavy asleep on your shoulder and Helen leaning into your side, and you will remember for the rest of your life which patch of Bertha's wallpaper you were looking at when the voice says, slow and hard, hitting each word like a nail, the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. The room does not breathe. The voice keeps coming. Plenty is at our doorstep, it says. The money changers have fled from their high seats in the temple, it says, and Bertha's husband, San Mihiel, and 30 years a sheet mill man, makes a sound low in his chest like a furnace lighting. The voice says it will ask the Congress for power to wage war against the emergency, broad executive power, as great as if we were in fact invaded by a foreign foe. And then band music, and the room lets its breath out, and the men start talking all at once. And you look down, and Helen is looking up at you, and she asks the question the whole country is asking in its 100,000 front rooms. Is it over now? No, you tell her, because you do not lie to children about the size of things. But it started. Monday morning, the 6th, the paper on Aldo's counter carries the proclamation in full, boxed on the front page. By order of the President, a national bank holiday. Every bank in the United States of America closed. 4 days, it says. Nobody believes 4 days. It will run past a week. No withdrawals. No payrolls that live in vaults. No cashed checks. No change for a 20 if a 20 even surfaces. The country is to run, until further notice, on whatever cash was in its pockets Friday night, and on trust, and that is all. And now watch this street, because this is the part you're here for. This is what 1930s housewives really did all day, the week the money ran out for everybody. Monday, Sam Aldo does not close. It never once occurs to Sam to close. He takes the credit book off its nail and lays it flat on the counter, open like a family Bible at a wedding, and he serves the street all day against pages, the known families at their known rates, writing steady as a recording angel. And for the strangers, the cashless, respectable, panicking strangers from the salaried blocks who have never needed credit in their lives and do not know its manners, he tears butcher paper into neat squares and writes due bills. Good for 50 cents trade, S. Aldo, and signs. A grocer's autograph, functioning as legal tender on the strength of nothing but 20 years of not lying about his thumb on the scale. By Wednesday, there are Aldo due bills circulating 2 streets over, passed hand to hand at face value, better than face value, because everybody knows exactly what stands behind them. Sam. The milkman, same. Leaves the milk. Every doorstep marks the route book. Says what all the delivery men on all the streets of America say that whole week. The sentence that ought to be carved somewhere in that granite downtown. Pay when it opens. And Tuesday morning, before 7, comes the knock that turns your kitchen into what it becomes for the rest of the holiday. It's Rose Faber from up the block, coat over her nightdress, and she is holding a $10 bill. Her husband got paid. Friday, 1 bill, and it is all the money in the house, and the streetcar is a nickel, and Aldo can't break a 10 by Tuesday. Nobody can break a 10. The whole street's change went into the collection plate in the meter men's satchels days ago, and her man has a day's work in Struthers if he can ride to it, and she stands on your step at dawn holding $10, cash-rich and coin-starved, unable to buy a ride, and asks you, because Bertha sent her, whether it's true you keep change. Bertha sent her. Bertha, who alone on this street has always known roughly what the flour tin holds, and has never once said, until the week it mattered. So you go to the flour tin, and you take out the jar, and you set it on the oilcloth in the full sight of a neighbour, lid off, and you count Rose Faber out $1 in dimes and nickels against her $10 bill, even trade, no shave, no favour price. Though the fellow at the cigar store downtown is taking 10% to break bills this week and calling it a service. And word does what word does. By Thursday, the egg jar of a laid-off machinist's wife has become the change desk of the neighbourhood. A dime for the meter here, 2 nickels for streetcar fare there, quarters for a $half. The big bills you take in walk down to Aldo, who alone can eventually use them. And you keep the accounts of it in the nickel notebook, a page headed holiday, every trade entered. Because the jar is not charity and not business, it is infrastructure, and infrastructure keeps books. $7.10 in small coin, turned over and over, greasing an entire block's week. The men downtown with the granite front kept their liquidity in a vault, and it froze solid. You kept yours in flour, in dimes, 11 cents at a time for 2 years against a disaster. And when the disaster finally came, it wasn't a sheriff or a doctor. It was everybody. And the jar was ready. The jar stays. You always said it. And now the street knows why. Wednesday of that week has one more scene in it. Small, at your own door. Mr. Gandhi, off schedule, hatless, which in 15 years you have never seen. The company's collections are suspended for the holiday. You cannot take money in a week. Nobody has money. But that's not why he's come. He's come because his book is his route, and his route is 60 families, and he is walking every one of them anyway, empty-handed door to door, saying the same 11 words at each. Policies stand. Holiday don't lapse anybody. Tell your neighbours. Policies stand. The wall holds, he is saying. Whatever else is falling this week, the wall holds. You give him coffee, half chicory, and he drinks it on the step looking down the grey street, and he says, "Quiet. More to the street than to you. 31 years on this book. First week I ever seen it that the poor folks was the calm ones." And he sets down the cup and settles his hat and goes on to the Kowalskis. He's right, and you know why, and it is the plainest fact of the whole holiday, the one the newspapers keep marvelling at all week. No panic in the working neighbourhoods, folks taking it in good part, wisecracks in the streetcar lines. The salaried blocks are in vertigo. Their whole machinery of living just stopped. Your street felt one thing only. The rest of the country pulled up level with it. Cashless, improvising, running on trust and books and barter. This street has lived there since 1930. You could survive the death of money because you had already done it. 3 years of apprenticeship served in kitchens, at fences, over credit books, and it turns out the trade you all mastered was the one the whole nation suddenly needed. Thursday the 9th, the radio says Congress met and passed the banking bill in a single day. Hours, shouting it through sight unseen. The sound banks will reopen under Treasury license, the sick ones held shut. New currency is printing overnight. Plane loads of it, they say, flying out to the reserve cities. Friday, Saturday, the street holds its breath and trades its paper. And Sunday night, the 12th of March, 1933, 10 o'clock, comes the thing that everyone alive that week will still be describing to their grandchildren half a century on, in those same oral histories where so much of this story sleeps. Bertha's front room, one more time. Every chair full, and the floor full, and the porch full. The window sash up 6 inches so the sound carries out to the men standing in the yard dark. June asleep in your lap. Frank on the floor against your chair with his forearm across your knees. Eddie by the radio itself, herringbone coat still on, comes straight from somewhere with the cold still in the wool of it. 60 million people are doing this exact thing at this exact hour, the largest audience that has ever gathered for anything in the history of the world to that night. And nobody in this room knows that number, and it wouldn't matter if they did, because what comes out of the Philco at 10 o'clock does not sound like 60 million of anything. It sounds like one man in a room talking to you. My friends, he begins, I want to talk for a few minutes with the people of the United States about banking, and then, flat calm, unhurried, a neighbour at a kitchen table, he explains it. What a bank does with the money, why the door's closed, what the licence on the window will mean, which cities open Monday, which banks Tuesday, what to do and what not to do. It is possible, he says, that a very few banks will not reopen, and he says it straight out, no varnish, and the room absorbs it like level ground. And then the sentence that the whole strange week has been building toward, the sentence aimed with terrible precision at every mattress and coat lining and flour tin in America. I can assure you, he says, that it is safer to keep your money in a reopened bank than under the mattress. In Bertha's front room, nobody moves, and then Bertha of the fence, of the pot and its bottom, says, out loud to the radio, dry as a struck match, he knows about the mattresses, and the room laughs, every soul in it, one short bark of a laugh with 3 years inside it, and the voice on the radio goes on, steady, and you sit there with your daughter breathing against your collarbone and your husband's arm across your knees, listening to a President of the United States describe, in his own words, confidence and courage, the essence of the whole program, listening to the most powerful man in the country explain that the machinery under all the machinery, the thing under the granite and the vaults and the printed plane loads, is nothing, in the end, but trust. You could have told him, it is the single subject on which this street holds an advanced degree. You've been banking in trust for 3 years, depositing it at fences, lending it across credit books, hiding reserves of it in flour. And Monday morning proves the lecture out. The lines that form outside the reopened banks in the reserve cities formed to put money back in. Deposits over withdrawals, the radio says Tuesday. Plain wonder in the announcer's voice in every city reporting. The Granite Bank downtown opens Wednesday under its license, and Frank walks down and stands in the short, calm line and deposits, with a straight face, $1, and comes home with the passbook squared and says, "Well, they held my two better than I'd have held theirs." The holiday is over. The money is moving again. It moved because the country, shown a locked vault, decided. 60 million kitchens deciding at one radio at a time to believe the man who talked to them like grown people at a table. Your street never doubted it would end this way. Your street had watched its women run exactly that bank all along. And then it is just March again. That's the thing about a great week. The kitchen is still standing there on the far side of it, with the bread sponge to set and the boiler to fill, and history goes back to being a thing that happens between wash days. But something has shifted in the middle of everybody, the way ice shifts in a river in the dark before any open water shows. You can hear it in how people say this year now instead of these times. You can hear it on the radio, which has gone from a furniture to a presence. There is somebody at the wheel and he works. The papers count the days of him like a prize fight. Bank Act, Economy Act, Farm Bill, a bill to put 250,000 young men to work in the forests at $1 a day, with most of every month's pay sent home to their mothers by allotment. And Bertha's grandnephew is signed for it by April, 17 years old, gone to plant trees in a government camp, and his mother's kitchen ledger suddenly $25 a month the stronger. They are calling the whole cascade the 100 days later. On this street it just feels like weather finally coming out of the right quarter. But the shelf doesn't care about weather. In the last days of March you go down the cellar stairs and count what the winter left. 6 jars. 6 from 109, and the garden 8 weeks from feeding anyone and the ice house not yet hiring, and the hungry gap opening at your feet one more time. The oldest arithmetic there is, and no fireside chat can close it. And it's Frank this time who ends the long silence of the clock shelf. A Tuesday night, the children up in bed, Miss Carey at her papers, the kitchen down to lamp and stove tick, and he gets up and takes the folded paper from behind the clock and lays it flat on the oilcloth between you and smooths the creases out of it with the flat of his hand once, the way he'd true a piece of stock. "We held out 3 years," he says. "Nobody can say different. Now it's planting season, and I've got children, and there's food down at that office going begging while I stand on my pride like a man on a ladder he's soaring at." He looks at you. "Fill it out with me." So you fill it out, the two of you, at your own table by lamplight, which is a mercy the woman on Centre Street never gave herself. Name of head of household, and you watch him print Frank in letters careful as engraving. Former employer, former wage, $32 per week, and his pen stands on that line a long moment and moves on. Dependents 4. He starts to write 5 and you stop his hand because a wife is not a dependent. A wife is the plant manager, and he looks at you and something almost smiles in him, and he writes 4. Assets, home, equity, about half, 5 hens, insurance in force. And here you both look at the buff card on the clock shelf, punched to date, unbroken through the whole worst winter of your lives, and he writes yes with a kind of ferocity. You walk it down yourself, Thursday morning, because Frank has a half-day promised at the coal yard, and that half-day is not a fiction you constructed, but you both let it do the work of one. And the relief office is exactly what 3 years of dread said it would be. A storefront with the windows painted over halfway up, a bench worn pale, a line of people studying their own hands, every one of them arranged around the same project of not seeing each other, and a tired county clerk behind a table asking the questions on the form out loud, so that your former wage and your 4 dependents and your 5 hens are spoken into a room of neighbours. It takes 40 minutes. The shame is real. Whoever tells you it wasn't is selling something. You wear it the way you'd carry a hot kettle with a straight back, and you put it down at the door on the way out, because there is marketing to do. And what comes of it is a grocery order. $2.50 a week, 4 weeks, county relief, spendable at any grocer on the approved list, and Sam Aldo's is on the list. So the order goes across the same counter as 3 years of the book, and Sam fills it without one flicker of a difference in his face, weighs the beans, wraps the soup bones for the dog that has never existed, and says what he always says. Tell Frank there's crates out back. $2.50 a week. It closes the gap. It buys the lard and flour and beans that carry the family across April into May, across the bare weeks the shelf could not cover, and no one in this house starves and no one in this house speaks of the order at the table, and both of those facts are the truth, and they lie down together every supper time like a dog and a cat that have decided on peace. April does what April does even in 1933. The ground dries, and this year there is more ground. The mill company, nudged by the city, which is nudged by everything, has thrown open the empty land on the hillside above the works for relief gardens, staked into plots, free for the asking to any family that will work one. And the asking is enormous. 60 families on the slope by mid-April. Frank puts your name on plot 19, a 1/4 acre of old pasture on the high shoulder of the hill, for potatoes and field corn, and the big vining things the back lot never had room for, and the whole enterprise of your family's food splits itself between the 40 by 90 behind the house and that square of hillside under the sky. And the hillside is where the year finally lets you look at it, a Saturday toward the end of April, the whole family up there since morning, Frank and Eddie breaking sod ahead, Helen and June trailing the potato rows behind you, dropping cut seed into the trench, June solemnly instructing each piece to grow, and you straighten your back in the middle of the afternoon, hands stacked on the fork handle, and you turn around, and the valley is lying there below you like a thing on a table. You have lived in it 11 years and never once seen it whole. The river in its long grey curve, the mills strung along it for 3 miles, sheds and stacks and ore bridges, enormous even dead, like something fallen out of an older story. The town fitted up the hillsides around them street by street, and you can find yours. You can find your own roof, small as a stamp with a hen run behind it. And the church spires, and the granite bank, and the rail yards where the coal trains slow on the grade, and tiny on the cinder slope, some other family's boy with a bucket gleaning. 60 relief garden families are strung across the hill around you in the wind, bent to the same work, and wood smoke is standing up thin from 100 chimneys you can name the women under. From up here you can finally see the size of what you have been inside of. One roof among thousands, one kitchen among 60 million, one woman's year of dimes and jars and turned wool. You're barely a stitch in the thing. But the thing you can see from up here is a fabric. It held because the stitches held, not the granite. The granite locked its doors. The stitches. You stand there in the wind with your hands on the fork and your family strung down the potato rows below you, and for one held minute you let yourself feel the whole weight and width of that. And then June shouts that she has found a worm as long as her arm, which is the hillside's opinion on the subject of philosophy, and you go back down the road to see the worm, because that is also the profession. Small things keep landing right. That spring, like birds coming back in ones and twos. The 7th of April, beer comes back. Legal beer, 3.2, the first legal glass in 13 years. And the radio plays the crowds in the cities at midnight. And this street, Methodist and Catholic alike, permits itself one collective grin at the sheer strangeness of good news arriving in bottles. Frank has a nickel glass at the corner on Saturday with the coal yard men, his first in years bought instead of bootlegged, and comes home smelling faintly of hops with his hat on the back of his head, and you do not say one word, you just look at him, and he laughs, and the sound goes through the kitchen like a window opening. That same month the county finally redeems its winter scrip at par every dollar, and Miss Carey gets 4 months held back pay in real money in one envelope, and the first thing she does, the very first before the shoes she needs, is come home with oranges, a dozen, out of season, one for every soul in the house and seconds for the children. And June eats hers down to the peel and then eats candied peel a week later, because you candy it, because nothing is wasted. Nothing is ever wasted. But this spring even thrift has started tasting like celebration. And in the 3rd week of May, on a Thursday, Frank comes up the walk at 10 minutes past 6 with his dinner bucket, swinging in a way you can read 100 feet off. The old machinist walk, the 1929 walk, and he stands in the kitchen door and says, plain as a man reporting weather. Machine shops calling back, 2 days a week to start. They say more by fall if the orders hold. The mills are stirring, actually stirring. The steel numbers climbing all that spring and summer in the papers. The first true uptick since the crash. And they want the hands that know the machines, and his name was on the list. First list he's been on since October of 1931, with his name said in that tone. 2 days a week, $12. It is a third of what he made, and it lands in this kitchen like a fortune, and you know exactly what it is before he says it, both of you doing the same arithmetic in the same second the way long-married people do. It is the relief order. Ended. Friday morning he walks to the county office himself, hat on, and takes the family off the rolls. 4 weeks of grocery orders drawn and off, done, cleared. And the clerk, who does not see this every day, or often enough anyway, shakes his hand. And Saturday morning Frank takes the folded application's carbon memory, the original paper, the one that stood behind the clock for a year and 2 months. And you watch him at the stove, and you think for a moment he'll burn it. He doesn't. He folds it back on its creases and puts it in the strong box with the deed and the insurance policy and the children's birth certificates. Leave it lay, he says. It's part of the accounts. The night he told you about the callback, go back to that supper a moment because you did a thing at it, and the family understood the thing without a word of explanation, which is how you know a ritual when you see one. You went down the cellar stairs, hand on his rail, and you came back up with the amber quart, the apple butter, the one jar that had stood on that shelf since the fall of 1931, the jar that survived 2 whole winters because every time the shelf ran low it was passed over, saved, nobody ever saying for what, through the hungry gap, through Christmas, through the 6-jar march, waiting like the dime on the clock shelf for an occasion worth being spent on. You broke the paraffin seal at the table and set it down open by the bread, and Frank looked at it, and looked at you, and nobody made a speech because the jar was the speech. The children ate apple butter on warm bread until the spoon scraped glass, and June licked the spoon, and Helen licked the lid, and that was the ceremony entire. This house has decided formally before witnesses that the worst is behind it. You wash the empty jar and set it with the others for the new season. Nothing is wasted, not even endings. By the middle of May, the radio is saying the new relief administration in Washington, federal money now, real millions, signed the 12th of May, has begun moving funds out through the states, and the county office where you stood your 40 minutes is suddenly a busier, better stocked place with its window paint scrubbed off. And on this street the last stretched families come through the gap fed. You watch it happen up and down the block with a bookkeeper's eye. Not miracles, just margins. A half day here, a check there, a son's camp allotment, a garden coming in. Each house is arithmetic creeping back over its own line the way yours did. Sam Aldo's letter comes in June, and Sam tells the whole street one customer at a time, weighing beans while he says it, offhand as a man mentioning rain, glowing like a stove lid. The boy is in a government forest camp in Oregon, planting trees. 3 meals a day and $25 a month comes home by allotment, and the first money order went straight into the credit book against what the family owed. The boy's own instruction, written in the boy's own hand. Sam keeps that letter under the cash drawer. The book above it grows shorter all summer, page by page, as the street's shifts come back. You pay yours off entire the last Friday of June. 40 months of margin between you and that counter settled to 0. And Sam draws the line under it and turns the page for July, and neither of you says anything except what's always said, "Tell Frank there's crates." But the line he draws is dead level and slow, like a man finishing a sentence he's been writing for 3 years. The arcs all close like that in small settlements through the green weeks of that early summer. Bertha's gas came back on in March. Square by March, she'd said, and Bertha's word held like everything else about her. And her husband is back to 3 days at the sheet mill by July. And one August evening on her porch, shelling limas into a dishpan, she looks into the pan and then at you and says, "Whole street saw the bottom of my pot this winter." A beat, lima pods cracking. World didn't end. Wish somebody told me sooner. Which from Bertha is a complete revision of her constitution, and both of you know no such revision will ever be admitted to again, and the fence law stands re-ratified, even as the two of you sit there having repealed it. Miss Carey signs her contract for the fall term, paid in money now the script press is quiet, and stays on in the front room another year by every party's unspoken preference. And in June, when the school year ends, she reports to the supper table that Edward passed into the 8th grade with the highest arithmetic marks in the building, and Eddie turns the colour of the stewed tomatoes and touches, you notice, the flat place in his coat where the micrometer rides. Helen spends her summer learning the treadle machine, your machine, feed sack scraps and herringbone scraps, and by August has produced an apron, a doll dress, and an opinion of her own seems so severe you have to hide your smile. And when she rips one out to do it over, jaw set, 8 years old, you see the whole guild moving down one more generation, and you say nothing at all, because saying would spoil the take. June is 4 going on 5 and has colour in her face like paint, and eats what lands in front of her, and has never once in her life to date known that she was poor, which is a wall you and Frank built around her year by year with your own hands, and which she will not see until she is grown and reads about these years in a book and comes to you, decades on, asking was it really like that, and you will say, "We got along." And Mr. Gandhi, the last Thursday of that June, punches the 52nd square. Click, a full card, a whole year of Thursdays, the year the money stopped, without one missed week on the record, and takes out a new card, buff and blank, 52 empty squares, and sets it on the clock shelf where the old one stood. "Proof you believe in next year, missus," he says, same as ever, settling his hat. And you look at that blank card after he's gone and you think, 52 more dimes, $5.20, and you will find every one of them, and next June there will be another card, and that right there, a small buff rectangle of organised stubbornness, is as close to a philosophy as this kitchen has ever needed. You do not yet know, standing in your kitchen in the high summer of 1933, with the canning kettle starting its first loads, with the shelf beginning to fill again, 30 jars, 40, the count climbing in the nickel notebook toward a number that will beat last year's, you do not yet know that the road out is long yet, that the mills will climb and stumble and climb again for years before they truly roar, that this valley will not see full furnaces again until another war lights them, and that war will take some of the boys now picking coal on the embankment. The histories will argue forever about which spring the tide really turned. Let them. You keep a different set of books. In your books, the entry for this year reads, "Everyone fed, every day. House held, family whole. We're all here." And in your books, that is not a small entry. That is the whole page. Because here is the sum of it, the thing the census never wrote down and the oral histories finally did 50 years late, in the voices of old women in kitchen chairs telling their granddaughters how it was. When the money ran out, when the mills went dark and the banks locked their doors and the men stood on the sidewalks with their hats in their hands, the country did not actually stop. It could not afford to stop. There were children in it. What happened instead is that an invisible workforce absorbed the shock. Millions of women, unpaid, untitled, unrelieved, got up at 10 to 5 and sifted the cinders and counted the eggs and turned the coats and stretched the beans and carried their neighbours and fed their husbands' pride, along with their bodies, and ate last and least and lied about it gracefully. And the sum of all that unrecorded labour was that a civilization crossed its worst decade without letting go of itself. The bridge held. Nobody ever named the bridge. The bridge was made of housewives. Some evenings that summer, you sit on the back step in the last light with the mending basket forgotten beside you, and just look at the garden black-green in the dusk, at the hens settling on the roost, with their small, contented machinery of sounds, at the light in the kitchen window where Miss Carey is reading, and the children are quarrelling gently over jacks, at Frank's shape moving across the lamplight, home tomorrow from the second of his 2 days, more days coming by fall, the valley below breathing its held breath out slow. Somewhere down the street, Bertha's screen door. Somewhere farther, a train taking the grade, heavier than trains ran last year, and you can read the tonnage and the sound now, the way you read footsteps and ash. 1 year. You count it the way you count everything, because counting is the trade. 52 wash days, 109 jars raised, 103 spent, a new 100 rising. 400 pounds of coal gleaned by one boy in a rebuilt coat. 6 hens, 5 surviving, 1 honourably eaten. 1 card punched full. 1 jar of dimes, emptied into a whole street's pockets and refilled, standing in the flour where it has always stood. 1 paper, filled out at last at your own table under your own lamp, filed, used, cleared and folded away in the strong box. Part of the accounts. 1 family, all here, fed enough, warm enough, together enough. You could stand at the stove and say those 3 like grace. because they were never once free, not for a single day of the year behind you. Every one of the 3 was manufactured daily by hand in this room, and if that is not a profession, then no man in that valley ever had one. The dark comes up out of the garden slow. June's window goes quiet overhead. And now, let the day do at last, listener, what it has been trying to do since 10 minutes to 5 this morning. Let it end. Let it come. Let sleep take you the way it took her on the good nights that summer, suddenly, completely, like a lid going onto a jar that has finally sealed. Let the list dissolve. Let the numbers lie down in their columns. Let your hands, whatever they carried today, unclench on the quilt and be only hands. Tomorrow there will be a stove to shake and a count to make. Tomorrow there will be bread and washing and the small arithmetic of getting everyone through. Tomorrow, always tomorrow, but that's tomorrow's shift and it isn't yours tonight. Right now there is only the dark kitchen below, banked and ticking, and the shelf under the house filling with summer, and the street outside full of houses exactly as tired and exactly as stubborn as this one. Every lamp going out one by one like a rosary being told backward. Centuries will pass. One has nearly since that kitchen. The mills she could see from the hillside are mostly gone now, taken down to grass and rumour. The washboards hang on antique store walls priced like curiosities, and the feed-sack dresses sleep folded in museum drawers with little cards explaining them. The Granite Bank is a restaurant. The Relief Office is a parking lot. But people still lie awake doing arithmetic in the dark, still stretch what's in the pot to fit the faces at the table, still eat last, some of them, in kitchens on streets you drive past and eat least, and say nothing, and stand back up at 10 minutes to 5. Some things don't change. The bridge doesn't change. Only the names of the rivers under it, and somewhere behind you, 2 or 3 kitchens back in your own blood, there was almost certainly a woman like this one. There was. Check the old photographs, look at her hands. A woman who counted her way across the worst of it so that the line would reach you. Whoever she was, the record has mostly closed over her, the way it closed over Anna, over all the Annas. The budget studies kept the numbers and let the names go. But you are here, warm, fed, listening in the dark, and that is her ledger balancing all these years on. That is what the whole year of dimes was for, so rest on it. The stove is banked, the door is bolted, the jar is in the flour where it stays. The count is done and it came out, the way she always made it come out. Enough. Good night.